I'm going to shift gears a little bit from the experimental stuff to talk about some of our other findings from surveys and other things. We wanted to tease out whether or not there were any differences in terms of the demographic characteristics of students and how they related to the rooms. And really, we didn't find much of anything in terms of your sort of traditional socioeconomic status and various and sundry demographics. So ethnicity didn't matter, gender or sex doesn't matter, and still doesn't. We still haven't found any differences along those boundaries. But we found two very interesting ones that are now actually no longer present. But one of the first ones we found was a rural metro divide. And this is only using Minnesota student data because students from out of state or out of country, we don't have county level data, but in Minnesota, for Minnesota students, we know what county they come from, and so we can code that out as being either from a metropolitan or a rural county. And so in 2008, the first time that we were collecting this data, we found this significant difference between rural students and metropolitan students, and this was quite astounding to us. As a political scientist, however, I said, my bet is that there's something to do with kind of value-related things. So there's this huge literature about materialism versus post-materialist values and so forth, and what people value. So materialist values are those who value economic and physical security. Post-materialist value sort of ideas and quality of life issues a little bit more. And those are typically aligned with underdeveloped countries or developing countries versus your advanced industrial democracies, as well as urban-rural splits. And so we figured that's probably part of what is going on there. And in fact, we found that out going back to the qualitative data on the backside of the surveys. One of my former colleagues ran a completely separate qualitative analysis, independent of me doing this, and was finding that along the rural-urban divide, there were clear differences there. So the rural students were coming to this and saying, I went to high school in a one-room schoolhouse on the prairie in Minnesota, and I did well enough to get into the University of Minnesota. I'm exaggerating, of course. But I did well enough to get into the University of Minnesota. I don't need this fancy space. This is a waste of time. This is a waste of resources for me, right? Because that value discrepancy of valuing security, that you don't want to spend overly if it's perceived as being unnecessary. There was also kind of a disposition and a skepticism surrounding sort of the newfangled kind of technology aspects of the space as well that came out of those qualitative evaluations. Whereas the students from the metropolitan areas were totally up for this. A lot of them have already experienced these kinds of spaces in their urban classrooms, especially, and K through 12, I don't know if you are aware of this, they're always on the leading edge of this stuff. They've been doing, those of you with small children know that kindergarten has known about the round tables for a long time. We're kind of slow on the uptake of this. But the urban students had already experienced spaces like these and technologically tricked out and so forth. So for them, it was nothing new, and a lot of the responses were very positive. They saw it as an opportunity, et cetera. So for me, this was like this great finding. We've got this discrepancy. It's unfortunate from a normative standpoint, right? We don't want anybody feeling kind of left out or left behind by it. But from a theoretical standpoint, this is good stuff. And then lo and behold, it gradually converges and kind of upsets that. So again, on a normative side of things, it's good, right? We don't want to see groups of students feeling disenfranchised or separated or perhaps isolated by the kinds of spaces that they're in. We want to see that convergence taking place. But we kind of lose that interesting little story that we